Okay, good morning, or good afternoon. Today is Wednesday, March 28th. It's a great day in the city of Los Angeles. It's 2 o'clock, and welcome to the Public Works Committee meeting. If anyone would like to submit a public comment card, please do so now. Do we have general public comment? Nothing? No cards? Great. Mr. City Clerk, please read the first item.
Item number 1 is a motion, Parks for Perry and Reyes, relative to naming the intersection of 5th Street and Main Street as Woody Guthrie Square.
Great. I failed to introduce myself. I'm sorry. I'm Councilmember Joe Buscaino for the record. And do we have anyone from the Department of Transportation here? Please come forward. Report for us, please.
We are already in contact with the council office, and our district has created the artwork, and we're just getting that approved through the council office. We were just waiting for this action, and then we'll be able to post it at the 5th and Main if it's approved.
Can you identify yourself, please?
Scott Morrill, City of Los Angeles.
Thank you, Mr. Morrill. This is exciting for that Woody Guthrie Square, and we will move forward and to proceed to City Council. Okay, thank you so much. So approved. That's too easy.
Give it time.
Okay, next item, please.
Item number 2 is a motion, Englander Wazar, relative to ensuring that all street repairs are completed to city standards.
I know, let's hold item 2. I believe Councilmember Englander wanted to come speak on this item. So if we can move on to item number 3, and we'll give Mr. Englander a few minutes.
Okay, item number 3 is a motion, Buscaino Wizar, relative to the roadway problems at the San Pedro Target store located on the corner of North Gaffey and Capitol Drive.
Good afternoon, Councilman Buscaino. My name is Lawrence Charisma. I'm the district engineer for the Bureau of Engineering in San Pedro.
Yes, thank you.
With your permission, can I pass a handout to you?
Please. You know, this is a big issue in my district, Larry, and it's more than a damaged street or driveway, as you know. It was the properties built on unstable land, and seeping water combined with the weight of vehicles and other elements causing the road and driveway to deteriorate. You know, my family and I often go to Target, and once we go through that driveway, you know, my kids bob their heads, they're always asking, Dad, what was that? And we're getting a lot of constituent complaints on this issue. So go ahead, Larry, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
With regards to the package that I just passed out, the first photo is just a photo of the layout of the area. You have Gaffey running north-south, and this is Capitol Street with the pink color running through it.
Mm-hmm.
And the second set of photos just deals with what the problem looks like. You have the driveway into Target that's got some potholes in front of it. You've got a sidewalk on the south side of the property where groundwater is moving along towards Gaffey.
I don't do it.
And you've got a picture of the subdrain.
Can we have the microphone closer, please? Thank you, Larry.
Picture of the subdrain that's coming out of the sidewalk that shows some algae buildup and so forth. With regards to the history of the project, I went back to the files this morning and went through and kind of did a little bit of a chronology about what happened. Back in November of 2005, in response to some concerns raised to the council office back then, Councilman Hahn, we had our geotechnical engineers go out and look at water bubbling up through a 2-inch diameter hole in the middle of Capitol Street.
Right.
And we had our geotechnical division take samples of the water, had it analyzed, and it turned out to be groundwater. Their recommendation from that report was to have the holes sealed. We're not sure who bored the holes into the roadway, but we had the holes sealed. And in April of 2008, again, in response to questions raised to the council office, we had the water in the area again analyzed, and it was the same groundwater bubbling up from the ground. So that area is a low point in the whole area. You've got an underground aquifer running towards Gaffey. All the runoff from the neighborhood further upstream comes down towards Gaffey and so forth. And prior to the Target facility being built, it was an open ballpark field. And prior to the ballpark, it was a bakery. And I don't have a timeline on the bakery, but the ballpark was.
Yeah, my dad worked there for 25 years,
Okay.
so it's been there for quite some time. It was there for quite some time.
So in researching the B permit for the project, which was the permit we issue for the construction of the public right-of-way, I observed 2 change orders that we issued back in 2008, and it was to allow the contractor raised a concern that when they were building the sidewalk on the south side of the property, they were encountering a lot of wet ground. And with city standards, we usually don't allow the pouring of concrete sidewalks with the presence of a lot of moisture, a lot of groundwater. So what was proposed by the contractor was 6 French drains that drained the water from that area to the street.
French drains,
Yeah,
can you?
and French drains are like a pipe that's perforated with holes in it, and there's a fabric around the pipe to prevent the clogging of the pipe. Then there's gravel around the pipe itself, and it's usually buried about 1 to 2 feet deeper. So what the gravel does is allow the groundwater to percolate down to the perforated pipe, and then it exits out to the street. So back in 2008, these 6 French drains were allowed to enable the contractor to construct his sidewalk and finish the construction of the public right-of-way in that area. After that, we again proceeded to have more deterioration in the street, especially at the entranceway with the driveway into Target, and we had a buildup of algae on the sidewalk towards the west side, and some of the residents raised concerns about a slip and fall hazard. I just went out today to kind of see whether the situation had improved, and it was my understanding that about 2 months ago, Target went back in and did some work on the French drains that were within their property. I didn't see any algae today. I did see some groundwater moving along, but that's because we just had a recent rainstorm this last weekend. So,
Just for the record, Mr. Kokorian just joined me, but he had to he just left. He knew we were talking on item number 3, so he had to recuse himself, and I'm now joined by Council Member Eric Garcetti.
Okay.
Thank you, Larry. Proceed.
And so, so with the history of the thing, your office, your predecessors contacted us, her staff, to figure out possible solutions to the problem. We gave 4 to 5 scenarios, ranging in cost from about $130,000, which was a channeled gutter that ran across the driveway that kept the water in the gutter, the smaller gutter, up to the Rolls Royce, which would be like rebuilding the whole street. And so the cost would range anywhere from about $130,000 to, estimates were about $130,000 to about $2.5 million or so. And so I think at that point your office had a discussion with Target, and I guess that's where we're here today to figure out what the next step would be.
Right, and it seems to me that Target's not being cooperative here. This is for us and for my residents. It's more of a, more of a public safety issue than anything else, in addition to being a quality of life issue. So those French drains, this bring us back to the building process. When what happened there? Between the permits were approved, obviously.
Permits were approved, and
did we not foresee this coming?
We did not foresee it. The permits were issued to enable the construction of the sidewalks to go forward, to allow the concrete to be poured in a more drier environment. I spoke to our plan checker, and I thought about the whole process myself back in 2008, and we didn't have a way to foresee that this would cause a problem in the street or further along in the driveway.
If the roads continue to deteriorate, what's legal option do we have to even to close that road and to close that ingress egress there?
I would.
Oh, the
prefer
city
to-
attorney's. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So the magic word, legal.
That's right. Please
Are you talking about from
introduce
type of
yourself.
what legal
Identify
action we
yourself,
have?
please.
Oh,
for the record.
Ted Jordan, Public Works General Counsel.
Thank you.
Assistant City Attorney.
Thank you.
We've not met before, so.
Yeah.
From a legal standpoint, we could look at this as nuisance type situation or a trespass, if this were the other way around, and often the city is alleged to have done something that's damaging someone else's property, so those cases are also trespass, nuisance. They throw in inverse condemnation when we're the defendant, but in this case, we would be the plaintiff. So we could look at this as a potential nuisance action or a trespass. Either one, we would probably allege both and then go after Target to make them do this. I think it would be best if Target could be more cooperative and address this problem. I think it would be to their benefit as well, because like you said, you encounter this when you enter their property. And so it would be to the benefit of their customers as well.
Again, we made several attempts to contact them. So this motion specifically requests the city attorney to review our legal options here from moving forward. Any steps the city can take to require a business to take certain steps of repair on public right-of-way?
Well, the public right-of-way, I mean, again, we could contact them and start asserting that this is their responsibility, but in terms of the work that's done, we can do the work and try to make them pay for it, or we can try to make them pull the permits necessary to do the work.
Make that happen. Great. Questions?
Just a quick question. Is this owned by Target, or was it a developer and Target's just this tenant?
Target is the owner.
They own the real estate as well?
Yeah, I believe the initial attempts to contact them by the council office, prior council office, were directly to Target.
Is there anything we could do with Proposition O in terms of looking at this? If this is a place where you're seeing a lot of water that is pooling, and it's, we've done green streets on residential streets before, but what we usually take is the low-lying points where there's a lot of storm drain water pooling, and it certainly looks like it is here, and figure out a way to re-infiltrate that water back in the ground and to solve the problems with some of the drainage issues. Is that anything that, I know we've saved a little bit of money on Propo projects. I don't know if there's anything left in it, and I don't know how expensive this would be, but was that ever considered, like looking at this as a commercial kind of green street?
We didn't approach the Propo program. The analysis of the water showed it to be clean groundwater with no contamination to it. I can speak to our Propo person and.
So the water's coming out of where? I'm sorry, I walked into
The
it.
area is a low point, and there's
It's draining towards from the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that's exactly what we've done for the green streets. The first one was in my district on Oros Street in Elysian Valley, and now we've been doing them in a number of places. But we've been looking for those low-lying areas in a given neighborhood where the watershed comes to a point. So it might be worth looking at and contacting some of the Propo folks.
Thank you, Mr. Garcetti.
Sure.
So I would move to approve this and ask the city attorney to proceed to review our legal options from here on.
Certainly, you can report back.
Good.
Concur?
Okay. Thank you, Larry. Thanks for your report. Let's go back. I see my colleague here, Mr. Englander.
I think he has to go to last, though, didn't he?
If we can have Mr. Krikorian come rejoin us, I should say. And Mr. City Clerk, can you please read item number 2?
Item number 2 is Englander Weezer, a motion from Englander Weezer relative to ensuring that all street repairs are completed to city standards.
Well, thank you, Mr. Englander. Please, welcome to the
Thank you.
Public Works Committee. Go
Thank
ahead.
you. Your Honorable Chairman, distinguished and respected member of the committee, Mr. Krikorian, and of course, Mr. Garcetti. Thank you for allowing me to come to this committee. This is an issue that is near and dear to my heart that I've been looking at for many years, quite frankly, and just trying to get my arms around it. There are roughly close to 200 different utilities that have the ability to cut into our streets, all the city streets citywide. And there is a process and general conditions that they're supposed to follow, the majority of which fail to follow. And I'm just going to point to a couple things to point out on that and why it's so important. When they've cut into the streets, and a lot of people complain every day, it's one of the biggest issues we get is the conditions of the streets in the city of Los Angeles that affect everybody, and they also affect emergency response time. And I don't have to go through the list of concerns and issues that the deteriorating streets bring up. I think we're well aware of those. But the work that's done is really to blame on a lot of the contractors that they come in, they do shoddy work. Oftentimes, they don't adhere to the rules in terms of peak hour operations. They don't come and patch correctly or fix things correctly, and we see it often. And then we try to go and find out who did the work after the fact, and we have no idea. We try to go after that contractor to fix it, but we don't know who did it. Because of the process and the way it works, and there's no teeth in the actual conditions, and that's what I want to walk you through, is trying to hold these contractors accountable. In fact, they were supposed to, according to these conditions, they're supposed to tag the street with an identifying tag that shows who did the work and the year they did it. I will ask a question of the committee if they've ever seen one of these tags in the street. And with the deer in the headlights look, I would assume the answer is rare that we see these tags. In fact, I've asked a lot of folks.
Who is this guy?
On the street. Well, for those who are only listening, it's not the
Green.
And so this is a very serious matter, and if you could, I would appreciate it if you take the matter very seriously. This is an issue that affects Angelenos in the city in the tunes of tens of millions of dollars in repair, in time loss, and repair to their vehicles and repair to the streets. And so we're looking at putting some teeth in this. The other issue is a lot of the contractors, because they don't follow the guidelines, they don't notify contract administration when they're doing the work. And here's basically how it works in a nutshell, is if you have a utility company or a cable company, whoever that might be, they have a work plan, and they'll submit the work plan to the Bureau of Street Services and Contract Administration and Public Works. The plan is good oftentimes from anywhere from a year to 5 years, and they'll typically state an area geographically that they're going to be working in and say, we're going to be tearing up this street approximately within this 2 or 3 square mile radius. Here's our work plan over the next several years when we get to it. Well, then they never notify contract administration when they actually start the work like they're supposed to. Contract administration is supposed to have an inspector on site the entire time they're doing the work. They don't do it because they're not aware they're actually out there doing the work. Then they're supposed to sign off on the integrity of the work that was performed and ensure that it was done to spec and to code. Most of the time, that's not done because they failed to notify contract administration. There's only 4 remedies available to the city and contract administration, and none of which are notices of correction or violation. There's no bonding requirement for them at all to go out there before when they submit for the permit. And so what we're looking at is to not only have some real teeth in this and go after those folks, and it's a lot of them who are not following the guidelines, but to put some teeth in it where we have either a bond and or, if they violate the bond, the ability to go after them for not tagging, not notifying, not having the inspector on site, to even perhaps require them to repave curb to curb if they fail to follow the guidelines. That's how serious this is. And so with me today is one of our inspectors and somebody who can walk you through this process and some of the ideas that contract administration is looking at that we've worked together on to come up with some real teeth in this new policy, if you will.
Please.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Russ Strazella. I'm Chief Inspector for the Inspector of Public Works, John L. Reamer, Jr. He's the Director of the Bureau of Contract Administration, Department of Public Works. Councilman Englander has done such a good job on opening this. I almost hesitate to read my prepared remarks. They're only 2 minutes, though, if you don't mind.
Don't worry, it wasn't that good.
You're just going to hear the same thing.
A lot of people were very impressed.
Let the record reflect.
Thank you. One of the greatest annoyances for your city citizens for so many years has been the prevalence of potholes in their city streets caused by poor workmanship or unfinished work that results from inadequate quality control during the activity. The Inspector of Public Works, Director of the Bureau of Contract Administration, is the authorized representative of the Board of Public Works, which is the Superintendent of Streets, and the City Engineer, the Board's permitting authority for such work in the public right-of-way. It is the mission and responsibility of our staff of field construction inspectors to ensure that any work in this city performed in the public right-of-way is conducted with the proper procedures, guaranteeing public safety, as well as ensuring that such work conforms to specifications designed to adequately restore the streets and parkways to a safe and structurally sound condition. So what has happened? What's going wrong? Why can't we do our job better? Former Secretary of Defense William Rumsfeld was once quoted as saying, "We don't know what we don't know." After struggling with this problem and doing our best to assist council districts all over the city with this issue on virtually a daily basis for many years, we're of the opinion that the expectations of the community that we should know what we should know are not at all unreasonable, but part of the services they pay for. The challenge in this trying economic time is to try to improve our operational capabilities with regard to that, but at the same time, look for ways to strengthen the cooperation of the entities that are making these holes in the first place. There are actually, as Councilman Englander has said, strict and adequate permit requirements that, if obeyed, ensure the appropriate city employees, that's your inspectors, have knowledge and oversight of such activities. On every permit issued by the Bureau of Engineering, one of the primary instructions is to call for inspection prior to noon the day before work in the street commences. I sort of bombarded you with a little folder there. There are some illustrations in there in the first packet of what is on every permit issued by the city engineer. And according to the municipal code, those are permit requirements that should not be violated and it can be penalized.
What's the penalty?
Well, in certain codes, there's different penalties. In Section 6261, there's a monetary violation for violating the permits or any condition of, violating any condition of a permit. So there are, because that's a permit requirement, contractors, if you catch them, could be cited for not notifying the Inspector of Public Works or not having a permit on site or working without a permit, et cetera.
And if you will, though, and I'm glad you asked that question, the penalty they're all administrative. There are no methods for actually physical correction of the situation at all.
Correct.
And so
yes.
they're all administrative.
That's correct. That's correct. The instructions for calling for inspection are not a formality, and they are not useless red tape. To illustrate its importance, I have on many occasions toured neighborhoods with various deputies from your offices as well as representatives from the CAO and been able to easily point out street repairs where our staff has been present and potholes and patches where our staff was obviously not there. To the trained eye, to the untrained eye, it's real easy to see the difference. It begs the question then of who indeed is doing their job. We suggest that those who are doing the work could do better in honoring their lawful requirements. If they don't tell us where they're working and we don't know, then we don't know. The present system relies on compliance, and though underscored by the codes, still relies on proactive cooperation with the permittees and their contractors. If this is not attained, you will have holes in your streets still, and we will not know who've made them. I have a graphic illustration, Councilman Buscaino, from your district that happened just yesterday. And by the way, welcome Mark Wright, who had the pleasure of going on the bus tour. Yes. He is a supervisor that works for me, as you know. He does the proprietary inspections for the harbor. He walked out of San Pedro City Hall yesterday morning and saw that a contractor had closed the right-of-way right in the middle of City Hall. And he asked them what they thought they were doing. They said, well, they're changing the lights around City Hall. He said, who gave them permission to do that? And they said, well, we have a contract. He asked them, who gave you permission to close this street? Well, they couldn't tell him because they hadn't asked. But if he hadn't been there and noticed, we may have got a call, or somebody may have assumed that it was okay. That's usually the big lie. People go by things that are happening all the time, assuming that everything is okay. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. 2 months later, you have a pothole, or a year later, and they ask us, how did this happen? We have to do detective work, spend thousands of dollars of staff time, sometimes just finding out what happened where. So we have talked to Councilman Englander, and we have come up. I've talked to my partner here, my good friend, Deputy City Engineer Mike Cantor. following the motion's directive for us to work together because we're very, very close working agency on these permit issues. We have come up with a concept that we would like to return back with you. It's going to take some examination about feasibility. We believe that Councilman Englander mentioned bonding. The city already has a process with sewer repair contractors where you have to have a special bond to be a bonded sewer repair contractor. If you do not have this bond, you do not do sewer repairs in the public right-of-way in this city. It's more expensive to get that bond because it takes more insurance. This condition was precipitated from the very reason problem with certain sewer contractors that the city experienced, and they decided to change the municipal code. We believe that it's possible that the city could establish a similar program with utility contractors, or perhaps contractors that work in the right-of-way at all. It cannot be licensing because the city cannot grant licensing. That belongs to the California State Department of Consumer Affairs. They're the only people to license a contractor. But the city can insist on a bond for anybody who operates in their right-of-way, as Councilman Englander has mentioned. And we'd like to explore the feasibility of putting a similar program in operation for anyone who works in the right-of-way. And we would like to go after their insurance companies if their clients don't obey the law. Plus, Mr. Cantor has an idea that the city engineer could establish an on-call emergency paving repair contractor list. With that, that would be done in a transparent fashion with typical city pre-qualification methods. We get a list. They would have maybe a 24-hour response requirement. It would rotate, and when we find these things, after we do enough diligence to determine that we're either not getting a response from somebody or that we can't find out what had happened, this contractor would be activated. They would make the repair. They would be paid, and then we would contact the surety. So the devil's in the details with all that. It's a very, very global type of concept right now. But we think that this might be the least cost impact to the city, because you're not talking about increasing workforce, which is, nowadays it's not something that we'd like to come to you about. We'd love to come to you about it. Actually, any help you can give us would be great. I have 14 inspectors covering a 468 square mile area. We do the best we can, and we always respond to questions, and we go after things, and we do the best for you folks that we can. But 10,000 issued permits a year. Anywhere from 3.4 to 4.1 permits a day, and that doesn't mean that the permits the person picked up yesterday are over with. So our inspectors are carrying 20 permits around, and as Councilman Engler also said, if they don't call us back on the final, we don't know if it's done or not. So you don't get your permanent resurfacing. A lot of the calls are, what's going on here? This thing is down 1.5 inches. It's been there for 2 months. They should have come back and capped it. We don't even know who they are.
Russ, explain the process of when, say, one of our field deputies, when the complaint comes in. How does that handled?
Well, we like to tell any of them to call us directly. That's the first thing, that if they have a pothole or something like that, call us. I'll give you my number if you don't have it, sir. Or call the Bureau of Contract Administration. I'll provide all the numbers for any council deputy that doesn't have them. What we do is we take the address, we run a permit search on the Bureau of Engineering's database. We use Navigate LA and any other technical stuff that we can to find out what was or should or what is registered to happen there. Then we find out if any of our field crews know about it, if it's been on the inspection call list. Then we go to dispatch and we find out if they indeed called in for inspection or if they ever have. And we follow that process until we can narrow down at least what happened or what may have.
Have we ever considered an MOU between these utility companies?
The utility companies, and Mr. Cantor can speak a little bit more articulately, are governed under the franchise agreements. The major utility companies, I must say, we work rather well with them. But I will tell you they have a lot of subcontractors. And yes, the utility companies, their crews, they have various communication problems also. But a lot of subcontractors that work for these utility companies are not even doing what the utilities companies are paying them for. So it's not an issue of simply getting in a room with the big five, big six, and having understandings, because that's been tried, and we've made a great deal of progress with the major utilities, including our folks at
I want to, thanks, Russ, for the report. I want to thank Mr. Englander for shedding some light on this issue that's affecting our streets in the city of Los Angeles. I will now turn it over to committee members if they have any questions.
Just real brief. Do we have as a condition restoring our stamped asphalt in the pattern?
There are requirements, sir.
There are
yes.
requirements in that, because I was looking at this, and that's also another thing that is after we've turned around neighborhoods like historic Filipino town, we have some very distinct, patterns that are from basket weaving patterns that are traditional to the Philippines, and boom, then you have this black stripe in the middle of it where somebody's done
Yes,
the work
sir.
and never restored that. So they're responsible, even if they don't have the technical expertise themselves, to bring the city crews that have the
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, that's
equipment
correct.
to do that. Yep.
I believe, and I don't have street services here, but the requirement is that that the permittee is responsible for restoring that decorative asphalt in kind, and the Bureau of Street Services, I believe, has a rotating list of specialty contractors that are approved to do so.
Okay.
In fact, if I could, it's item 15 of the conditions. Any damage to decorative sidewalk or pavement or crosswalks must be repaired in kind and
I was looking at the wrong
reconstructed at the
page.
same
Thank
kind.
you.
So that is pointed out. Again, going back to this problem though, 9 times out of 10, we have no idea who did the work.
So I'm intrigued by the chairman's question about the MOU, and I'm wondering, why isn't it just getting the 5 utility companies in the room and making them accountable for the subcontractors who are performing beneficiary work for them? I mean, I can understand it's very difficult to go after, bandit subcontractors, if you will, but really, why shouldn't that be their problem rather
is,
than
sir.
ours?
It is, sir.
So then, wouldn't it be an effective enforcement mechanism to have an agreement with those utility companies so that enforcement is had against them and incentivize them then to go ahead and police their own subcontractors?
Well, we don't leave the big utility companies out of this concept. We haven't fleshed it out for you today, but the utility companies, as a major operator in your right-of-way, would be required to have the same type of bond. And if their subcontractor does not perform or respond for them when they're instructed to get them back there, then we go to their insurance company and make them pay. Either way, somebody's going to pay other than your constituency.
So I'm trying to understand this in a context a little bit, because I've had situations, we've all had situations like
Yes,
this.
sir.
I had one recently where the surface was faulty. The city required that it be repaired. Collection was made against the bond. But I think that was a sewer situation. So are you am I understanding correctly that there are different standards of bonding requirements depending on what is installed underneath the pavement, whether it's a sewer repair or a utility repair?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the same pavement is cut in the same way, the same hole is dug, but we have a different bonding requirement depending on what goes in underneath.
Yes, sir.
So, okay,
So
I think this is very important. You were right, Mr.
This is
Englander.
critically
and I think it's important that we hear your, full proposal that you're going to present. But I'd really like to see a lot of emphasis be put on holding the beneficiaries of this work to a higher degree of accountability and not putting on the city the onerous task, and your 14 inspectors the onerous task of trying to find the needle in the haystack of figuring out who these subcontractors are. Because whatever our bonding requirement is, if they're not compliant, they're not going to be compliant. If there are people who are going to go and install your lights around the San Pedro City Hall without asking for permission to close the street, those are probably the same people who are not going to bother to get a bond too.
Oh, yes, sir. That's a good point. I lift a lot out of the details, but if you notice on the copy of the sewer permit, it shows bonded contractor. Now, it's interesting, I picked up one where the guy's bond license is expired. The system kicked this out for us. It was laying in my dispatch office, and we stopped them from going to work. There's a lot of computerese that we're envisioning to do in tuning up the permit process, so that perhaps if you didn't have the right, say, serial number, for lack of a better word now, which is tied to the bonding capacity which they have to apply for, you'd have a restricted field, and perhaps you would not get a permit at all. You'd have to be a member of this bonded club to even apply and work in the right-of-way. So we've got a lot of things to look at, including the technology, and to try to do that as economically as possible, too. But as you see, the system kicked one for us that we knew not to allow to go forward. I'm envisioning something like that would help address the problem you're raising.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. With that said, I move that we approve this motion.
Yep.
And without objection.
Second.
Thanks again, Mr. Englander. Russ, thank you for the report.
Thank you.
Thanks for your leadership on this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Garcetti.
I'd like to now ask, now that we have a form, that we reconsider item number 1. And that's going to be the naming of the Woody Guthrie Square. If you can just read the item.
Yes, item number 1 is a motion, Councilmember Parksford, Perry, and Reyes, relative to naming the intersection of 5th Street and Main Street as Woody Guthrie Square.
So, colleagues, I approved it as a chair, but now as a committee as a whole, we ask that we can approve this and move forward.
Want to sing it?
Should we sing it?
Yeah.
Well, I
This
just
land is
wanted
your
to
land?
point out that this intersection is my intersection, this intersection is your intersection. This intersection is named for Woody Guthrie.
From San Pedro to Studio City?
From the Redwood Bar to the...
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I will also, so we move on that, Mr.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, great. Also ask that we take items 4 and 5 together. And if you can, Mr. Clerk, please read those items.
Item 4 is the city engineer report relative to the vacation of Pioneer Avenue and East Street, southeasterly of Alameda Street. And item number 5 is the city engineer report relative to the vacation of alleys located on the southerly side of Alameda Street at Le Couvert, I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, Avenue, Eubank Avenue, and Harry Bridges Boulevard.
I see here from Bureau of Engineering, we have Edmund Yu.
That's right, Edmund Yu from Public Works Engineering. Good afternoon. Basically, for these two items together, the Harbor Department, they are working on a project on one of the major container facility. So in conjunction with that, the Harbor Department, I think, has acquired a lot of properties in this area. So some of the public streets in this area are no longer needed to provide access to individual properties because they are all under the Harbor Department's ownership. So based on that, the Public Works Bureau of Engineering recommend the City Council to approve this vacation request at this time.
Great. I move that we move forward on these two items without objection. Thank you so much, Mr. Yu. And moving forward to item number 6 that we want to approve on consent. Unless any of my colleagues have questions on it. Can you, for the record, read the item?
Item number 6 is the city engineer report relative to the vacation of Colorado Boulevard, portion of northeasterly side, southeasterly of College View Avenue.
Good job. Questions, colleagues?
Nope.
Okay, so that'll be approved via consent. And with that, any other items, questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, before we adjourn, I just want to make sure the record reflects that I had recused myself for item number 3.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, I'd like to thank city staff, Officer Duarte, and we will see you at the next Public Works Committee meeting. Thank you so much.